Welcome to another CEO Wisdom podcast. We have John Goedschalk with us today. John is a CEO and founder at BioTara. John's a nature-based solutions pioneer with over a decade experience in climate finance, carbon credit dev, and conservation program design. He's in Paramaribo in Suriname. So I think it's the first Suriname guest we have on this podcast. So, John, welcome. Tell us a bit more about yourself and what you're up to nowadays.
Yeah, absolutely. My pleasure, Charles. Well, first off, thanks for having me. A little bit about myself. I'm an economist, but I am a conservationist by mission. So I'm an economist by training, and conservationist by mission is how I like to identify. So I think it was about almost 15 years ago now that I actually discovered what was happening here to Suriname in terms of climate change and biodiversity. And it's quite simple, really. Once I knew, I couldn't unknow. So I kind of had to ask myself the question, now that I know that the city I grew up in is drowning due to climate change and the forests are burning, which are exacerbating climate change and are taking away our protection from the worst of it, what am I going to do? Am I going to pretend like I don't know and just keep on making a dollar? Or am I going to do something that I can be proud of 20, 30 years from now when my kids ask me, hey, Dad, what were you doing while the world was burning and the city was drowning? And I want to be able to say that at least I tried and I did my part. So I think it was in 2011 that I really joined the fight. First negotiating at the UN for my country for climate change. And after that, I transitioned to the NGO world where I led Conservation International Suriname for very close to a decade, 9.5 years to be exact. And then it was 2 years ago that I resigned that post to take on this new challenge of building BioTara, which I did explicitly because I believe that there's more to be done from the corporate world or from the side of impact entrepreneurs. And I want to be a part of that. That's not just to diminish what NGOs can do. I think they have an incredibly important role. But for myself, I'm kind of an entrepreneurial spirit, and I wanted to build beyond what was possible within an NGO setting.
Interesting. And talking about Paramaribo, first time that I ever lay eyes on that city, it looks like pretty colonial or something. Like it's pretty unique. Is it like
Oh,
Jamaican
it is.
style or something like that? I don't know how to
No,
describe this, but man, it's quite unique.
yeah, yeah.
Tell me a bit more about it.
So this is UNESCO World Heritage, so we're a World Heritage site for our city because, like you said, it is unique and it is old colonial style. So these buildings have been there for hundreds of years. And what's interesting about that image right there is that it's actually a mosque right next to a synagogue. I think this is actually a Hindu temple, but
Yeah.
if you look further on, I think one of the things we usually like to show is that we're very peaceful here to the point where you can have like a mosque and a synagogue right next to each other. And that's kind of like one of our sites that we usually show people.
And there's a
Because
Ernst and Young in Paramaribo, like you worked there. Like, is it a big
I
city?
did.
It looks quite
No,
small though.
no, it's quite small. But yes, there was an Ernst and Young office back in 1999 when I worked there. 1999, that's right. That's when I worked at Ernst and Young, and that's when there was an office here. They've since moved out of the country, but it is a very small country. There's 630,000 inhabitants, so very small. Now, in terms of size, we're not that small, right? But in terms of population, we are. But what's interesting about us is that we are the most forested country in the world.
The more
So
forested. So tell me a bit more about that precisely. The most.
over 90% of the country is covered in forests,
Wow.
tropical rainforests and mangroves and other types. Yes. So
Huh.
per person that lives here, we have roughly 30 hectares of forest per person.
and people or corporations came in to pillage that.
It's not quite that simple. So it's not a matter of corporations coming into pillage or people wanting to destroy. It's people mostly here in Suriname trying to make a living, and due to a lot of issues such as the Civil War, which happened, I think it ended in '87, but it really did destroy quite a bit of the economic and infrastructure that we had. So for quite a few years now, there are many people that live in the forest that have been struggling to make a living. So they've turned to destructive gold mining and logging to be able to feed their children and to pay for schools and transport. So it's not about demonizing any activity, but the fact is that our forests are under pressure. The deforestation is on the rise, and there is gross mismanagement of our natural resources. And so it's not about big corporates coming in, it's also about our own incompetence in terms of our institutions. So we have institutions that monitor the forest, that manage it, that give out concessions, and those are often corruptive and also quite incompetent.
Right. And when did you specifically realize that? Was there like one specific experience that had you like, oh shit, this is not going right? Has there been like an extensive deforestation? You said 90%. Did it go down to 85 or
So
80%?
so when I started working on climate change and conservation, we were at 95% forest. Now we're at 92.7% forest. So over the past decade, we've already lost roughly 2%, which some would say, oh, that's okay. Yeah, you could, but it depends on what you get back in terms of worth. And the challenge we're seeing is that we're destroying the forest, but there's no value really being generated for the people, right? So it's destroyed, but there's no value coming back. So I say, if you're going to cut down the forest, at least make sure that you improve people's lives and their livelihoods. And that's simply not happening. A lot of the money is staying with a small group of friends and family or politicians, or like you said, maybe in some cases, some corporates.
And how are you changing that specifically? Which company?
Yeah, so BioTara's premise is really, how do we make standing forests worth more than dead forests? Okay, so how do you generate enough economic value so that people don't cut down the forest, right? And remember, Charles, for you and me, it's quite simple, right? Oh, it's super valuable for climate and biodiversity. Don't touch it. But if you're living there in the forest day in and day out, and you need to feed your kids, if you don't have something else on offer, you're going to cut down the tree, you're going to sell it, or you're going to cut it down and mine the soil beneath it, or you're going to convert it into large-scale agriculture because you need to put food on the table. So what we do at BioTara is we increase or improve the connectivity between the forest and the global marketplace, specifically in the cosmetics and personal care industry. So BioTara enables trade to happen between, let's say, big cosmetics or personal care companies. For example, we're partnering with Colgate-Palmolive right now, who are interested in potentially sourcing some of the oils and butters that we help to cultivate. And we're experimenting to see if we can come up with a really cool product for the global consumer market. And what that does is it then creates this value of the standing forest, because the botanical ingredients that we source or that we help companies source all are all harvested regeneratively, meaning that there's no conversion of primary rainforest into this other crop. It's all already naturally occurring. So there's wild harvesting. And then we ensure that as the seeds, nuts, and other botanical ingredients get harvested, they are then processed using the most regenerative processes that we've been able to design, which include a level of circularity, which causes these ingredients to be carbon negative. So to give you an example, if one community we work with, Kamtawa, right? They, for example, are harvesting these ingredients. but then all the residues are turned into biochar and are buried in the ground. And what that does is it in fact causes there to be a net sequestration of carbon as opposed to emission of carbon every time a kilo or a ton of these oils and butters are produced. So we can promise and offer carbon negative products to the world.
Interesting. And if you do that at scale, which is probably needed economically as a good capitalist, how do you replant all those trees sustainably? Is more my
No, there's
question.
no replanting.
Okay, you
There's no
just
cutting
cut
down
like
of
the
trees. No,
fruit.
we don't cut. No, we don't even cut the fruit often. We wait for it to fall in some cases. In other
Huh.
cases, yes, we cut the bunch, but a lot of times it's also waiting on it to fall. And again,
Interesting.
there's a set of regenerative harvesting principles which vary per different type of ingredient. Some ingredients you harvest, for example, the entire plant, like when you need the roots for priprioca, for example, and then you replant that plant. But acai, you only harvest the fruit and you use the pulp to create the oil. And the
Interesting.
jambu, if you take the little flower, patawa, again, it's the berry, copaiba, it's actually a resin. So, every single one of these has its own story and its own unique way of being produced and harvested.
Yeah, and I don't know most of these. I know acai for sure, but all of these others I don't know. Do they have like specific properties that are
They most
not?
certainly do.
Tell me more about them.
Well, for example, murumuru is an incredible emollient. That means it's super soft on the skin and the hair, and it blends incredibly well. So you can use that as a base for different cosmetics or personal care ingredients, such as moisturizer for your hair or shampoo, leave-in conditioner, all these different things. And it's just incredibly silky, and it's just a beautiful product.
And the production, what does it look like? For example, let's take muru. How many samples of these do you produce per year?
Well, no, the way it works is that when we get an order, we then go out and produce at scale, right? So let's say that there's a order of, let's say, 1 ton of murumuru butter.
Mhm.
Then that means that we have to harvest roughly 10 tons of the nuts. And 10 ton of those nuts are then first they're dried, then they're cracked, then they're shredded, then they're dried again, then they're put into a hydraulic press, then they're filtered, then they're stored, and finally they're shipped.
And you can just go out and take 10 tons just like that? Like how are you making sure that nature produces that much?
Well, we've done scientific research, of course, and we are also have experience with it. And we know, for example, that 1 hectare that contains murumuru trees can generate roughly 1 ton of the fruit regeneratively, which means it generates 2,000 kilos. We leave 1,000 kilos for nature. We take 1,000 kilos for production, and we make sure that all the residues are again turned into biochar and are then buried in areas that are either degraded or deforested so we can help the forest recover. So it's also active regeneration of the soil and not only passive regenerative.
And that's part of your sustainable process to only start production once you have the order?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Yeah, we don't just generate stock and hope to sell it. That would be quite wasteful.
But what if you can predict how much you're making, and what if there's like no, I guess there's an expiration date that's quite soon since it's all organic, right?
It's roughly 2 years. You can store it under the right conditions. And in this industry, a lot of this is really made to order, Charles. So L'Oreal's not going to show up today and say, I want 10 tons of babasu today. It's usually they say, hey, we're interested in this product. Let's see the quality specifications. Let's do some sample testing. And then let's, do some stability tests with our formulations. And, once all that's good, then you deliver the following year, oftentimes. So there's quite an extensive development cycle in the cosmetics and personal care industry. Also, because you have to test it for stability, shelf life. You have to do a lot of consumer testing, efficacy testing. So this is not a quick moving business. You don't get out there and start selling like you sell 50 cars. It's really developing these relationships, and then um, very securely making sure that you can produce and deliver at spec, at time, at cost as required.
And did you get these big brands reach out so far, like L'Oreal and all of that?
Well, we've got a few. I mean, I can't speak about all of them, but I can speak that publicly we've engaged in a partnership with Colgate Palmolive, and they are a significant player in the personal care industry, as you're well aware.
Right. But these folks, I mean, yeah, they might innovate in some countries. I mean, I'm in Mexico here, so we don't see that many sustainable or organic products for them. Like, can they actually take that route? Aren't they like very much money and profit driven, and they don't care much about like an expensive but sustainable
Well, but
product?
but this isn't an expensive product. So what we've done is we've re-engineered the supply chain in such a way that we've removed a number of chains, a number of links in the chain, which allows us to sell at market price as opposed to at a premium. So our products do not require a premium to be paid for them, even though they do offer incredible impact. But we do not charge a premium. We sell at market rates.
Right. And is it like a unique product that you only sell? Because it's the first time I hear about those, or is it like widely produced in not so sustainable manners in other places in the world?
Well, the thing about the types of products that or ingredients, I should say, that we're offering is there are other folks that are doing it, absolutely. However, to my knowledge, I have not seen them generate the types of fact-based scientific reporting that we do, right?
Interesting.
Yeah.
And for the company, for example, what volume do you normally do on a yearly basis?
We just launched the company. We just launched the company, so we're very much starting. And that also immediately speaks to what it is that we're looking for right now. We're actually still very much looking for customers, clients that are looking for these types of beautiful ingredients for formulations for cosmetics and personal care. So we just commercially launched the company last month.
Nice,
Yeah.
exciting stuff, scary stuff as well. Like, how will you actually reach out to these brands? Do you have like a marketing plan, or will you send LinkedIn outreach, for example? What's your GTM
Absolutely.
plan?
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple of different things. First off, going to these very specialized fairs where we've already started going. We launched the company at In Cosmetics, which is In Cosmetic Global is the largest cosmetics fair in the world, and that's where we launched. Then I'll be speaking at a number of these types of events, like in New York next month, and then potentially in Las Vegas in July. So the technique is real, or the strategy is really to get out there, get our voice heard, and then also do very proactive outreach using LinkedIn, and then of course the necessary social media presence. So those are the things we're actually um, launching over the next couple of weeks and months.
But you figured out the full production part. You already have your suppliers.
Oh
That's
yeah,
already mapped out. Do you have a
that's
couple
all
of
good.
samples available?
Of course, yeah. So if anybody is interested, they can go to the site and order samples easily, and we'll send
Okay.
them right out.
Well, very cool. Good luck on that one. So I believe the website is biotara.earth, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
Cool. Well, thanks for being on. That was John Goedschalk and Charles